G'day everyone, this is Michael Partis from Assure Global Plus. We are a debt recovery specialist organisation. Everything from end to end, from one day overdue through to asset recovery and disputes, we can help organisations do it all. Today, we're talking to Paul from Mentoris Group. The reason why we're talking to Mentoris Group is we do a lot of referrals to them around people who have difficulty trying to work out strategy and confidence in building those pieces. But let me not tell you about them. Paul, talk to us a little bit more about Mentoris.
Hey, Michael, thank you, and thanks for having me and giving me an opportunity to chat about what we do. Wow, what do we do? Business advisory. We sit outside of business and we help them see what's possible for them. We look at their cash position. We look at their clients. We look at their profitability. We look at how they can squeeze more out of the orange, but not necessarily have to do more work. We sit with the business owners and help them see these are the pain points we've got. We can't solve them ourselves. This is what we want. We create a plan and we get them moving forward. So business advisory, cash management, strategy, sounding boards. We sit outside of business and we bring accountability to the business.
So if we look at that cash flow cycle generally, and I tend to look at what the pointy end is, which is, hey, let's get that cash in the door.
Yep.
We saw some really interesting trends towards the back end of last year. Now, part of it was motivated by the ATO pressing a little bit harder for people to repay their things, but it was also about people just getting slower at paying their bills. And so there was this perception, that this sort of common set of themes that was coming up around how do I get the money that's owed to me in after the horse has already bolted. What are the types of things that you've seen people talk about that says, hey, people are being slow in relation to into that collection cycle?
It's so interesting because last year I ran 3 workshops around growth. And the topic was, what does growth mean to you? And what came out of a lot of that was, people weren't they weren't aware of what it is that growth meant to them. They weren't aware of the increasing strain that was coming into the general economy on people for cash. For an example, if someone has a $50,000 mortgage, then they have to find an extra $30,000 if an interest rate goes from 2% to 6%. But if you're working for someone, how do you go to your boss and say, hey, can I get another $30,000 post-tax? And that's starting to flow through into business. It's starting to flow through to personal. And you mentioned about the delay of people paying. There's an element of looking at what are the essential payments we have to make and who are the squeaky wheels. We will look after them first. Those that aren't actively chasing, then we'll just let them go until they chase.
Yeah, and it's really complicated, isn't it? I mean, we get to see it more, especially as we got closer to Christmas. Everyone's saying, hey, I need to get this money in the door. I have the tax offers, some of my suppliers that I've sort of stretched out a bit, the bank wants their bit, I'm going on holidays for a month. So, I'm not going to have that cash flow over Christmas. How do I keep everyone happy and the system ticking over through that period?
And generally what happens, and I don't know whether this is something that goes out to emails of all accounts payable departments, but from the middle of December to the back end of January, the payment cycle is again deferred because it seems as though the accounts payable departments get a month off, officially, unofficially, whatever it is. So you look at that to say December, January is the challenging time for cash. If you choose to not value yourself in a way where you're managing how you manage cash proactively.
Where I really see that manifest a lot is where people are a little lackadaisical in how they issue and how they collect in those earlier months. So, I mean, you and I both know that between sort of Melbourne Cup and Australia Day, your chances of getting somebody to nail down a time where they do something is particularly challenging. So when you start talking about, hey, I might offer 7-day terms, but I don't really start chasing it till it's more than 30 days overdue, and then I'm probably going to get strung out by another 30 days. Geez, that becomes really complicated, and it sort of manifests most around Christmas. because people go, oh, there is this block of time where everyone's going to be away. How do I reshape that? How do I bring that back into order? And most importantly, what I'm really curious from you is, how do we help people get 2025 back on track now that people are starting to come back out of the wilderness?
Really interesting context that you put in that, because the thing that I'm seeing is where people don't value themselves, they're not prepared to put things in place to have people pay on time. Yeah. So for example, well, first of all, I've got to invoice. If I'm not invoicing on time, then I'm delaying, the clock doesn't start ticking until I invoice. Step number one. And the amount of businesses that I've seen that have been whinging about not having any cash, and the first question is, so how much are you behind on your invoicing? Oh, 5 weeks. Okay, so how much is that? 60 grand. Okay, well, if you had that 60 grand sitting in your pocket, would you be in a cash flow situation? No. Well, I'm not going to say that's obvious, but do you reckon you might change the way you look at it? Because without invoicing, then the clock doesn't start ticking. And so in that space, if when they choose to not value themselves, consciously or unconsciously, then they don't send the invoices. They don't ask people to pay. They don't follow up before a payment. So, quick example, all of my invoices, the day before it's due, it has a reminder. The amount of people that ring me when they get that reminder say, "Oh shit, sorry mate, I'll pay that today." They don't even read it. It's just a reminder, but I'm reminding them that it's due tomorrow. But people don't see it. So that element of becoming, if you value yourself, you'll do what you need to do to ensure that those people are paying on time or ahead of time. But if you don't, you let it go.
And that's a really good point you make. Are there specific industries where people value themselves worse or better than others?
Yes. Yes. And I'll say
like what?
Yeah, great question. But 90% of industries have exactly the same thing. I'll say trade and construction. They tend to be in a space where a lot of the the valuing of oneself is more related to technically how good they are, not areas where they are not strong or they haven't had education or they're just winging it. Or so, trade and construction. There are some things that ensure that they pay a certain time, but when you look at subcontractors, etc., then it's very fluid. And if someone doesn't value themselves, they're not going to ask for the money, because how do I go to a builder and ask for 60 grand of payments? He's just going to tell me to bugger off and you'll get it when you get it. Well, possibly. Or it's like, well, what is it that we can set up? We call it having the adult conversation up front.
It's really interesting you say that, because when I think about trade and construction, it's generally people who are good with their hands, not necessarily good with their books in terms of that sort of stuff. And I understand that we're all challenged in different ways. What I find really interesting with what we see, and we see a lot of trade and construction stuff, is that they feel powerless. So it's not even about them valuing themselves, it's they feel less valued because they feel powerless in the contracts that they have with other people. And we spend a lot of time trying to help people rebuild that confidence around what rules are in place and what systems they can use to make sure that a debt that is slow in paying actually is prioritized moving forward.
Totally. And stepping back into that space of going, well, in the first instance, do they have contracts in place? Let's throw that in there as a number one. B, do they have contracts, but are they prepared to put certain clauses in there to show that they value themselves enough to say, hey, if you don't pay by this date, this is what happens. Or if you're not ready for us to start work on this particular date, then we're going to take our team away and you're going to have to pay a fee, demobilization fee. There's a company that I know, they implemented that. One of the builders went, we're not paying that. They said, well, contractually, you have to. And they went, oh, since then, they've never missed a start date ever. Yeah. So what did it take? Took them to value themselves enough to say, no, we have a phrase, my house, my rules. Unless you're prepared to actually put into play that, Someone says, oh, I'm not agreeing to that. Well, maybe it's a red flag. Maybe you're dodging a bullet. Maybe you're sitting there going, oh, I know this guy's going to pay late because they're not prepared to agree to this.
So interestingly, at Assure Global Plus, we spend a lot of time, especially for tradies and subbies that don't have written contracts, helping them reconstruct those contracts out of emails and texts and whatever other correspondence types they've had with people in order to deliver that starting point where they can say, hey, yes, a contract actually exists, where there might not be one that has been firmly written out with a normal set of T's and C's. And the other thing that we do at Assure Global Plus on that front is actually use the leverage that every state provides through their version of the Security of Payments Act. And the Security of Payments Act is really important for people who might not have those formal processes in place or are feeling a little confidence shy, as you're talking about, where we can actually turn around and sit down and work with them using the existing legislation in place in order to help them get their debt prioritised.
Yeah, which is perfect because I look at the space that we're in, that's not even close to anything that we do. And the beauty is the fact that we get to look at their business holistically, clients, workflow, financials, profitability, team, etc. We look at all those areas and we go, well, what's not working? This. What do you want it to be? This. Okay, well, if we can create a strategy for the business, then who can help you? Well, Michael, you guys do an amazing job because then it's going into the specifics of how do we make sure that we de-risk this business aligned with the strategic view of the business where they want to be 31st of December 2025. Then we create that picture and then go, who do they need? Well, obviously the profitability is not there, the cash flow is not there, the pain points are that their clients are paying late, their clients are rubbish, whatever. We reset that and go, well, do you have T's and C's in place or are they up to date? No. Well, maybe a conversation with Michael and your team to be able to go, we can update that to de-risk people paying late or allow you to be able to recover where people choose to not value you and choose to pay late, even though you've asked them to pay on a certain time.
On the other end of the spectrum, I suppose, is professional services. I see so many professional services organisations that are both slow at invoicing and really poor on collections disciplines because they understand where their client is and they're so deeply empathetic to where their clients are, their debtors are, that they struggle to have the confidence to go and ask for payment.
Bingo. And when you said, so what industries do you feel are generally worse than others? The reason I kind of laughed was because of the fact that my mind initially went to trades and construction, but then my mind went to professional services because we talk about people not valuing ourselves. Then as a former accountant, then my expertise was accounting, not chasing money. And so if I was looking to invoice a client and they weren't prepared to pay for it, that potentially could have been a challenging conversation, which I may have either put off, or it was something that yes, good at what we do, but there's that fear of, well, they'll tell me to bugger off and they'll go somewhere else. So there's an element of if we value ourselves enough, we'll have that conversation up front to say, this is what it looks like. This is what the investment will be. If it fits, cool. If it doesn't, that's okay. Let's work out whether it's something that we can or can't do. But this is what will happen. If you choose to value us, we will value you. I mean, all of our clients there's a one pager which essentially says, this is what we expect from you. This is what you can expect from us. You agree to that, we move forward. So then in that space, you will pay your bills on time. If not, we have a reminder to say, are we aligned with all of this? If the answer is no, then, well, we've got a decision to make. Either we value ourselves and say, sorry, this is not working, or we say, it's not working, but let's look at how we can make it work. Otherwise, we're going to have to choose to go on a different path.
And I like the way you use the term investment, right? If we actually went away from invoice as a term and went, hey, your investment in us is an investment in yourselves, then value is being created across that whole spectrum, which
That's
it
right.
generally isn't. And
That's it.
business isn't complicated, is it? So if
No.
we talk about what do? We offer somebody something, they buy it, we do it, they pay. Is really how it works, because you normally get paid at the end unless it's for specific goods. What I particularly appreciate about what we do, and I'm talking myself up here a little bit, but at Assure Global Plus, is we are one of the few organisations that are willing to look at that whole cash flow cycle from creation of that invoice, creation of that investment opportunity for your client, all the way through to how do we collect it when the communication has failed, when something has broken down, when people are using handbags at 10 paces, to conduct a conversation that didn't need to exist. It just needed a more frank, more honest, more open dialogue around what the difficulties might be.
Yeah, and up front, the key to that to me is being able to have that conversation up front, because you can sit there and go, when you enter into a contract with a client, this is the way it operates, but should you choose to not pay, that's okay, but this is what the process is. This is how it goes. And if you have that conversation up front and they're challenged by it, then it's so what's challenging? Well, we have cash flow ourselves, which is all over the shop. It's like, well, let's talk about that, because that potentially may be an issue in the way we do things. So maybe we put them on a retainer.
I
Or
think you're 100% right. 100%
yeah,
right. Like, regardless of when you issue an invoice, regardless of what your credit terms are, the moment that you issue that invoice, you should be calling them after 7 days to ensure that they're satisfied that that invoice is going to be paid, or whether there's an issue to be resolved. And if you have neither the time nor the expertise or the confidence potentially to have that conversation, then that's when you should be using somebody like Assure Global Plus to help you through that process. So my question to you is, and I know we're sort of running short on time here, what would be your top 3 pointers to any business come 2025 to improve where they're positioned with their debtors in getting payment?
so number one is, what's your starting point? Actually accepting that you have debtors as they are. Yep. Unless you accept it, you can't do anything about it. So accept that your debtors are what they are. So that's number one. Number two is, be honest with yourself to say, am I the one that's going to chase this? If the answer is no, then that's okay. Don't judge yourself about the fact that I have to chase everything. But if I'm non-confrontational, then I don't feel comfortable chasing cash, then I'm not going to chase cash. So then my business is going to suffer. So two is, who, if not me, then who? So who should be chasing this? And then 3, looking at clients that you're taking on and your client mix to say, am I doing everything I possibly can to ensure that my debtors are not going to be where they are now in 12 months' time?
I could not have summarised that any better myself. Thank you so much for your time today,
Yeah.
Paul.
Thank you, sir. And good luck with everyone 2025. It's going to be a ripper.
Absolutely.